At issue this Sunday morning, 6 months in, the Trump administration is touting the president's accomplishments since returning to office. How does the American public feel about the job he's doing so far? The White House fighting back after reports that the president is named in the unreleased Jeffrey Epstein files. A judge, meanwhile, has denied a DOJ effort to unseal secret grand jury testimony in the Epstein case. How likely is it that we will ever see those transcripts? Get some legal analysis. And a top party leader in Philadelphia. I talked to the chair of the Democratic National Committee as he visited Pennsylvania. A peek at our battleground politics conversation.
NBC10 at Issue starts now.
I'm Lauren Mayk. Welcome to NBC10 at Issue. This past week, we reached the 6-month point of President Trump's second term. To mark the occasion, the White House released a highlight reel.
Donald Trump immediately getting to work with a remarkable show of the use of executive power.
We've never seen anything like this.
Well, his first 6 months saw steep federal government cuts and court fights over them, the announcement of sweeping tariffs on major trading partners and negotiations on those, and an immigration crackdown. Now we're seeing Americans' views on how the president is handling his job. A Fox News poll released on Wednesday shows 46% of registered voters approve of the president's job performance. 54% disapprove. That same poll asked voters their thoughts on the budget bill passed by Congress and signed into law by the president. It's also known as the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill. 39% of respondents approve of it. 58% disapprove. Now, when asked about their personal financial situation, 44% said it was excellent or good. That is up from 39% in March. To talk more about President Trump's first 6 months, we have two people on different sides of the political aisle. We're joined by Democratic strategist Eleanor Desi and Republican strategist Joe Watkins. Welcome back to NBC10 at Issue. It's great to see both of you.
Thanks for having us.
So, Joe, let's start with that report card for the president that we just talked about. Are you surprised his numbers aren't higher?
No, not at all. I mean, this is pretty consistent for him, these numbers in the 40s. And I think he's doing just fine. You know, people may like or not like the handling of a particular issue, but at the end of the day, his base is very solid. So I think he's doing just fine.
And, you know, Eleanor, from cuts to the federal government, to deportations, you know, President Trump is taking actions that he said he would do in office. What do you think of how Democrats have responded to them?
Well, I think the big, beautiful bill is showing exactly what his strategy is, and it has Americans pretty upset. I mean, you figure we've cut out U.S. aid, DOJ has gutted the federal government, IRS employees are being let out the door, and there is just a feeling of discontent and a feeling of the unknown. What we know is that the future is unclear, and Americans don't like that. They like to know where we're going, and you know, what it's showing is 10 million Americans are going to lose their health insurance. That's monumental. $3.4 trillion being added to the national debt. And there's just so many unknowns. And then you speak about ICE and the immigration. People are unhappy with this. It is affecting the farmers. It's affecting restaurants. It's affecting a lot of the economy. And of course, the 800-pound gorilla or elephant in the room is the Epstein file, which is showing 81% Americans want the file, not just the transcripts, they want total transparency. So I think the next few months, the first 6 months gave us a roadmap. The next 6 months are going to give us a look into the future, especially next year with the midterms.
Well, Joe, let me ask you about this bill that we just heard Eleanor referencing there, and we also had some poll numbers about this. You know, how do Republicans handle selling this bill? We just saw Vice President Vance in Pennsylvania not long ago, sort of starting the process of selling it. But in Pennsylvania, when you've got some Republican members of Congress who voted for this, and then a Republican member of Congress in Bucks County's Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick, who didn't vote for that bill, how do they handle this in a place like Pennsylvania?
I think all the Republican members of Congress will talk to their constituents and explain themselves, explain why they voted for the bill and what they think the bill is going to do, how it's going to help America move forward, how it's going to cut some of our expenses, and to help us to be stronger on a number of fronts. And I think even the one member that did not vote for the bill will do the same as well. He'll explain to his constituents why he chose not to support it. Now, he realizes that by doing that, there's always the possibility politically that he could open himself up to be primaried. But that being said, I think the other members of the Congress in Pennsylvania who are Republicans will explain why they supported the president and why they support this bill.
You know, one of the things that Democrats and critics of the Trump administration kind of rallied around during these first 6 months was Elon Musk and his role. He's not there anymore. Eleanor, as we head into this second half of the year, how does that change things?
Well, what he did was he gutted the federal government. And now there's so many court cases going on, Lauren, which are, in the federal courts where the judges are hearing the cases. And many of the federal employees are being called back. The IRS, the State Department, a lot of the people are being called back because they can't function. And, when you talk to these career people down in Washington, they really said there, and there's been a lot of investigations to see if there really was a lot of fat and waste, and there wasn't. And so what is happening is services are not getting done, and that's affecting the electeds, the House and the Senate, and many of them, well, the whole House and half of the Senate is coming up for election next year. They want to get services done. So you're seeing a lot of the people being called back. And yes, Musk is not there, but we all knew that the relationship between Trump and Musk was not going to be a long-term relationship.
One of the things that was interesting in that Fox News poll to me was that they asked people about whether you wanted the government to lend a hand or leave me alone. And the percentage of people saying lend a hand had jumped by 16 points since last year. So if you are a Republican lawmaker, what do you do with that information?
Well, I think there's a lot of confidence, especially on the part of the base, in President Trump and his ability to handle the economy and to build a stronger economy with more security for Americans. And so I think that's what Americans are looking for. They're looking for that kind of help from the government, that is to say, from the president and his administration, to strengthen the economy, to provide for better outcomes for Americans. And that's why you've seen that jump in the polls.
Beyond policy and some policy wins for the Trump administration, I think about some other things that they have managed to achieve, like the agreement with the University of Pennsylvania, and then this past week, an agreement with Columbia University. When you think about places where you might see pushback to the administration, Eleanor, what kind of an impact do you think things like that could have?
I don't think that people are looking at that so much right now, Lauren. What they're looking at, what I'm hearing from the sort of man on the street or woman on the street, they're very concerned about the unknown. Like example, the SNAP program, which is the food program for the poor. People are very concerned about that. People that run pantries, people that run things like Fill Abundance, they're very concerned because we don't know what that's going to mean when the kids go back to school. What's it going to do for school lunches? What is happening with all the changes in the Department of Education? We're all getting ready to see our children and grandchildren go back to school. What changes are going to happen there? I don't think they're looking so much at the universities right now, but the impact on their daily life. And what they're also concerned about is the rise in energy cost and the fact that this big, beautiful bill will give tax breaks to the rich. And people are not happy about that.
Joe, there is sort of an expectation that state governments are going to pick up the costs of some things. What if they can't or just don't?
I think that state governments certainly will have to step up. I mean, that's why we elect governors and state reps and state senators to make decisions about how to spend our money and how to make sure we protect the citizens of Pennsylvania. And I think that I have confidence that that's going to happen, certainly in the state of Pennsylvania and in other states around the country as well.
You know, you're saying that, though, at a time when we don't have a state budget in Pennsylvania. It is late. It is almost a month late at this point.
But it's coming.
Is it? Is it coming?
It's coming, but do we have the money to supplant what the feds have taken away?
All right, we're going to have to leave it there for now. Eleanor, Desi, Joe Watkins, thanks so much. Great conversation with both of you. And we'll be back with more in just a moment. A judge is denying a Trump administration effort to unseal secret grand jury testimony in the Jeffrey Epstein case. How likely is it that we will ever see those transcripts? We have legal analysis straight ahead.
This is NBC10 at Issue.
While there is plenty of debate over what the Trump administration is doing when it comes to funding and policy and immigration, a recent political firestorm has centered around documents connected to the investigation into Jeffrey Epstein. He died in prison in 2019 while awaiting trial on sex trafficking charges. His death was ruled a suicide. Well, the Trump administration is pushing back on a Wall Street Journal report this past week that says President Trump is named multiple times in the unreleased Jeffrey Epstein files. The paper, citing senior administration officials, also notes that Attorney General Pam Bondi told the president in May that his name appears multiple times, along with other high-profile figures. Now, a DOJ official tells NBC News that a mention of anyone's name would not necessarily suggest wrongdoing. The Attorney General said nothing in the files warranted further investigation or prosecution. On Wednesday, a federal judge in Florida rejected the Justice Department's request to have secret grand jury transcripts unsealed from the Epstein investigation. The House Oversight Committee also plans to subpoena Epstein associate Ghislaine Maxwell. Maxwell is serving 20 years in prison for recruiting and grooming teenage girls for Epstein to sexually abuse. And joining us now to discuss all of this further is NBC10 legal analyst Enrique L1 Latoyson. Welcome. Great to see you.
Nice to see you.
Help us to break this down and understand this, because the request was made by the DOJ to release these grand jury transcripts. It has hit a roadblock. Why is that?
So grand jury is different from the Epstein files. So the word Epstein files is being used to basically say everything involving the Epstein case. It's very important to understand that the grand jury testimony is a separate thing. The investigative file is a separate thing. And when you put the two together, the word Epstein files is what's being said about all of these things. But there are different rules and different laws depending on what we're talking about. So if you're talking about the grand jury testimony, there are laws involving grand jury transcripts. It's a secret proceeding that's done, a very important proceeding that's done in the justice system, allow prosecutors to be able to convene a grand jury of people to be able to listen to the evidence that they're presenting. It's not cross-examined. There's no defense attorneys or anyone in there. And they basically put all this information out there, and the grand jury listens to it and says whether or not there's evidence to possibly file charges. So this is something that's done before charges are even filed. So because that proceeding is such a sacred proceeding here in the United States in our justice system, it is very basically impossible to have those types of proceedings opened up for the public to be able to look at it.
If these grand jury transcripts were to be released, would you expect that we would see attorneys starting to ask for other cases to also be released? Is that one of the concerns?
Absolutely. And also, too, usually the grand jury testimony isn't going to be, quote, the most juiciest information, because it's basically a prosecutor just basically giving some evidence of things that they believe is going to be favorable to them in order to just get to the probable cause. It's just talking about probable cause here in order to file an indictment, in order to file charges against a defendant. So basically, it's kind of a smorgasbord of different things that they throw out there in a grand jury.
Does it include like supporting documents? Would grand jury materials include like the supporting documents as evidence?
It could, but it only needs to be just enough for the prosecution, very low bar for them to be able to get a grand jury to agree to find them in favor to go ahead and file charges. So in order to, you're going to open up this grand jury testimony. People are testifying in secret. They're being told it's going to be in secret. They're told it's confidential. We're talking about people who believe that they're talking about things that will never be revealed to the public. That is one of the core points of a grand jury testimony. So it is pretty, I'm not surprised that the grand jury testimony is not being open. But once again, that's only part of the Epstein files. I mean, the whole other part of the Epstein files is not the grand jury, and this is something that could be released.
So there are parts that you think that the DOJ may have that they could just put out that wouldn't include grand jury testimony.
So,
but that wouldn't be everything then.
Well, then this is where it gets interesting. So when you look at, quote, the Epstein files, this is their investigative file. This is everything that they used, or all the notes and different things that the different FBI and different individuals took from interviewing witnesses and things of that nature, all the things they uncovered. And based on what they had in the Epstein files, they used what they had, what they believed at the time, to have enough evidence to prosecute.
So to your point from before, those files could still contain things that were not the basis for charges, things that there still could be innocent people or victims.
So this is kind of what the issue here. They might have heard from, they might have, for example, they could talk to 100 witnesses, and witnesses could tell them all kinds of things. They write all these things down. Doesn't mean that things are true, but they're in the Epstein files.
They're part of their investigation.
Right.
What's the standard when an investigation like this is done? Is everything kept? Is that the standard, that you keep everything for a certain amount of time or forever?
Well, people appeal. People appeal to a higher court. New evidence is discovered. So, yes, when you have a file, as soon as you obtain a conviction, or in this particular case, a suicide, a person died, they don't just throw everything out. I mean, that stuff is still there. I mean, the Justice Department, if they wanted to, could release these files. However, anyone's name that's in that file automatically is going to be assumed to have been doing something wrong or something illegal. And in the end, they only file charges against 2 people. And one of them obviously isn't here now. So I think the whole thing is, how do you release those Epstein files, those investigative files, without tainting innocent people? Or how do you do it in a way where you are basically saying maybe this person did something wrong, or a roster or a client list? There could be a client list. There could be people on there who did bad things. There could be people on there who did nothing wrong. So then you get into the slippery slope of, if you're going to release those investigative files, how are you doing it? Then are you redacting this? As soon as you redact something and put a black line, people are going to say, well, what's in the black line? What are you covering up? So it's actually it's just a mess. It's an absolute mess of how do you help quell the public's interest in conspiracy theories, but how do you release information where maybe you're getting the bad people, but then protecting the good people, and then who decides who's the bad, who's the good? Just a mess.
All right. Well, thanks for being here to help us wade through it all. We'll wrap it up there. NBC10 legal analyst Enrique L1 Latoyson, thanks for sharing your expertise. Just ahead, a peek at my battleground politics conversation with the Democratic National Committee chair, making a stop in Philly and talking about the party and the races ahead.
This is NBC10 at Issue.
Democratic National Committee Chair Ken Martin recently made a stop in Philadelphia. I spoke to him for a recent episode of my Battleground Politics podcast. Here's part of that conversation.
If you look at sort of the post-2024 time for Democrats, it's been a little messy. It's been a little messy.
That's an understatement.
Yeah. How do you convince people, in particular, how do you convince young people that you are listening to them and that you can actually deliver?
Well, I think it's really important. Young voices matter in this party, right? And we have to be intentional about creating pathways to their leadership, right? Both in party leadership, but also in elected office. There's great distrust out there, especially amongst young people in institutions, whether it's institutions of government, whether it's political institutions, whether it's political leaders. And, frankly, there's a lot of people in our party who've held on to power for so long that they're not seeing people who are like them, right? They're not seeing themselves represented in the political discourse. And we have to do a better job of making sure that they see themselves in these spaces and they see opportunities for themselves to actually participate if they so choose. And so we have to do a better job. We also have to realize that a lot of young people, right, they're not motivated by party or candidates. What they're motivated by is the issues. And they want to see real, durable, lasting change on the issues they care about. And so part of the way we get young people back is by actually standing up and fighting hard for the things that they care about, right? Making sure that we're actually delivering on the promises we make when we have power. And at the end of the day, like I said, giving them a chance to actually, participate within that process. So, there's so many things I could say. One of the things that's important is, for me, bringing people in, young people. There's no DNC chair that's probably done more in their short time time to actually democratize the DNC, to bring new voices into the process, including young people.
One of the things that is a little bit sticky for the DNC is how you handle primaries.
Yeah.
And that's really where young people and any voters get in to decide who will represent them. How do you wade through that? How do you handle that, given that that's the entry point for people? It is,
and let me say this, because I think part of that debate between me and David Hogg, as an example, I want people to understand this, because David and I support each other's positions. I actually think primaries are really important, because primaries not only do they hold elected officials accountable, right? They bring new ideas and fresh perspectives into the conversation, and they're also a pathway for new and exciting leaders, right? And so primaries are really a healthy part of our party process, and I support what David's trying to do with having more primaries in this country. There's nothing wrong with that.
That's just a small portion of our conversation. To see much more from my interview with DNC Chair Ken Martin, check out my Battleground Politics podcast. You can watch the episode on NBC10.com or on our NBC Philadelphia YouTube channel, or you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be right back.
This is NBC10 at Issue.
The tragic death of a Delaware County girl is now leading a Pennsylvania state senator to introduce a safety bill that would regulate electric scooters. It's called Abby's Law, in honor of 12-year-old Abby Gillen. She and her friend were riding an e-scooter in Aston last month when they were hit by a car. Abby died, and her friend Bella Jones is recovering from injuries. State Senator Tim Kearney's proposed bill would establish safety requirements for operating e-scooters. It would also create a public awareness campaign to educate riders and parents on safe ways to ride. Count on NBC10 to keep track of the legislation, and we'll let you know if it passes and becomes law. That does it for this edition of NBC10 at Issue. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day.